So, Star Wars has officially left the premium shop in Disney Dreamlight Valley, and I can't help but wonder what sort of precedent this premium shop rotation has set, and whether we will see any other kind of like questionable IPs coming to Dreamlight Valley in the future, and what this means for the game going forward. This isn't a prediction video, really, or anything like that. It's more of just maybe like a ramble. I don't know. Maybe everybody's going to drop off when I say that. If you like my rambles, welcome in. Let's call it maybe like a thought experiment. I don't know, something like that. A little bit of speculation, but not a prediction. Obviously, Star Wars was quite a big talking point in the Dreamlight Valley community. A lot of the player base was split. I do not want this. I absolutely want this. I found myself in kind of the do not want this camp, but then moving over to I love this, this is amazing. So opinions can change, and I'll hold my hands up and say that. I do think that the most important point, though, is that the Star Wars collaboration, well, it wasn't really a collaboration, but the Star Wars items that we saw within the game were not realms, they were not characters, it was just cosmetics, which I think eased a lot of those concerns for the player base. But if we are decorating with Naboo bundles, if we are wearing kind of like Padme outfits and running around with R2-D2, it does beg the question, what does that mean for the game and what could be next? So that's what we're going to take a look at today. I think it's fun to speculate on these things. I don't know what the future holds. Gameloft can do whatever they like. The Star Wars stuff was definitely a surprise, but let's just talk it through, see what might be coming, see what we could kind of come up with, and maybe see how we feel about those things. Okay, so Star Wars obviously stuck out because it was really the first IP that came to Disney Dreamlight Valley that wasn't rooted in, I suppose, fairy tale, or at least just core Disney as we know it, because it is an acquired asset for the Disney company. I know Pixar is technically an acquired asset too, but they've been with Disney that long. I think a lot of people associate those two very closely. I would say up until now, Dreamlight Valley has really leaned into like the animated films, whimsical storytelling, and just those like classic characters that we know and love. I mean, there's a lot of fairies going on, there's a lot of like Toontown, and then of course there's all the traditional castles and fairy tales and all that good stuff that we know and love Dreamlight Valley for. Star Wars, on the other hand, including when it was referenced in the previous surveys, is a slightly different tone. It does have world building, which I love, even though I'm not a big Star Wars fan. It does have world building, you know about the worlds, it has an aesthetic that translates really well into different formats. But there is a lot of sci-fi tech, there's a lot of political rebellion, and lightsabers. So, I mean, that's just a couple of things. I guess it's kind of like if you turn up to, I don't know, if you turn up to a garden party, which Dreamlight Valley feels like it could be a garden party, and then somebody just pulls out the lightsaber and you start getting wow, wow. Just a difference in tone to what we're used to. But as I said at the top, it did split the community, but I feel like a lot of players came around once we saw the items and we realized it was just cosmetics. I know that I did, and I was never like kind of anti-Star Wars because I dislike it actively. I was just like, it's not my thing, and it didn't feel like Disney, but the integration, and I've been on record saying this, I've said it on stream, I've said it in videos, these items for me I think are fantastic. I think the integration and the collaboration was done brilliantly, and Gameloft probably couldn't have done it better. If I try and come up with notes, I just don't have any. So then I kind of suppose for me, what begs the question is, what makes something Dreamlight Valley friendly? And where do we draw the line of like, okay, well, this shouldn't be in Dreamlight Valley, this should be in Dreamlight Valley? Or is it that we kind of look at it from another angle and be like, okay, well, we accept more of this IP as long as it only comes through cosmetics and not characters? You know, there's a lot of kind of like talking points there, but good IPs for Dreamlight Valley usually hit like two or three things. They're usually very visually charming, or I nearly hit myself in the face. They're usually very visually charming or whimsical. Whimsy is definitely like high up there on that list. They're very character driven and friendly in tone, and kind of like towing the line of kid friendly, because a lot of children do play this game as well. And then number 3 is probably the biggest one, and the one that we've had so far. It's just rooted in Disney's classic kind of like animated storytelling, which is of course what we all know and love and associate with Disney, which is why sometimes I think for some players Star Wars can feel a little bit jarring tonally. I mean, Star Wars definitely ticks kind of like the world building and the visual aesthetics, at least, because the world of Star Wars, if you will, is very beautiful. It's very specific, and I love that sort of like crossover between tech and futuristic with kind of like all those warm, earthy, rustic elements. I think they've done it really well. But I like that it stops at cosmetic items because I don't know how I would feel about live action characters coming in, especially from Star Wars. Like, it would be kind of weird to see like Obi-Wan watering the flowers, or I don't know, Darth Vader fishing on Dazzle Beach next to Goofy. I feel like it would be, I don't know, a little bit off. Obviously, Star Wars has come and gone. We don't know what the future holds for Star Wars. It could be that we get Realms. It could be that there's a DLC being prepared with it. We don't know. That was testing the waters, I think. But it does lead me to think, like, is that a gateway IP? And then what could be next? And I mean, the most obvious choice, of course, is Marvel. It's an absolutely massive franchise. It is Disney owned now, so I could 100% see Gameloft licensing the characters, or at least licensing some of the visual aesthetics from Marvel and bringing them into Dreamlight Valley. For me, I don't know. I don't even, like, okay. I know that when I did a Star Wars video a couple of weeks ago, there was a lot of people saying like, I didn't complain when Moana came to the Valley, so don't complain when Star Wars comes. And I'm not complaining. Absolutely not. It's just like in a personal opinion, I care for Marvel even less than I care for anything else. I don't know. There's just something about Marvel. There's something about superhero films that I don't vibe with personally. And of course, if it's just cosmetic items, I cannot buy them. However, I was converted on the Star Wars items, so that's not to say that I won't be on Marvel. I do think aesthetically with Marvel, there are a lot of things that Dreamlight Valley could do. It's quite a large IP, it's quite a large franchise, so they could tap into a couple of different things. I mean, we could definitely see maybe Captain America's shield. I think that's one. Thor's hammer, they could be accessories easily in the same way that the lightsaber is, and they could have custom poses because they have set a precedent with that, especially because the lightsaber came with 4 poses. We could totally see like a Stark technology bundle or something that integrates sort of like Iron Man's aesthetic. We could even see some Spider-Man implementation because there's a lot to go from there. I don't know. It's hard to pinpoint because Marvel feels so huge at this point. I know that one really requested item is like a Scarlet Witch outfit, I think from WandaVision or something like that. So I think costume-wise, there is a ton that they could do as well. But for me, it's the same thing. Like characters, that is different. Realms, that is different. I could see them offering it as a DLC, but if something is, I don't want to say controversial, but if something splits a player base, like I don't want to see that versus I want to see that. I think Gameloft doing a DLC, it cuts their potential profit in half if they know that half of the player base don't actually want to see it, even though DLCs are optional. Gameloft wants to maximize that and have every player purchase the DLC. Of course they do. Because I have to be honest, it would be kind of weird to see Spider-Man walking around the valley. Maybe that'll happen in a couple of years, but when there's so many kind of like Disney IPs that they haven't touched on, princesses that we don't have, I would rather personally see those first. I will say similar to Star Wars, like Marvel tonally feels different to the Dreamlight Valley that we know now. It's bigger, it's more epic. It doesn't kind of like match that gentle, slow pace that we have right now. But I do think that fans would love merch. I do think that fans would love cosmetic items. And I think that we could probably see a Marvel crossover with Dreamlight Valley at some point. And the licenses are probably quite expensive for Gameloft to purchase because we know that Gameloft does actually pay Disney to use this licensing. So it was probably quite expensive for them to license the Star Wars items as well. So I don't know. It has to make financial sense for Gameloft to do it for us to actually see those come to the game. There is actually one franchise that I didn't think of, and then I read a little bit more about it, and I was like, I could actually see that working, and that is Avatar. So I don't know the ins and outs of the details, but I believe that Disney bought 20th Century Fox, which Avatar falls under in 2019. So technically, Disney is kind of like a very high-level owner of Avatar, and of course, Pandora is in Walt Disney World, and that looks amazing. That is kind of like show-stopping if you've not been to Pandora before. So I could totally see that aesthetic coming into Dreamlight Valley, and not just because I like Avatar, but I do think that the world is so rich, it's so visually stunning, I guess, that many of those details could be pulled in to Dreamlight Valley. And I don't know, I could kind of see them doing a biome or a realm or something based off Avatar if we do go down this route of opening it up to non-animated, sort of like Disney classics in the future. Just think we could get like a big glowy treehouse, or maybe even like some sort of like shimmering river. Imagine if we could terraform with like one of the rivers from Avatar. That would be fun. And we could even have a companion, one of the wood sprites, you know, like the little sort of like air jellyfish that I like to call them, that like glow and sort of float next to you. That would be fun. Cosmetic wise, I think that they sound like great options. Having said that, if we're going into like story and tone and stuff like that, bringing characters in and all of that sort of good stuff, Avatar falls slightly at that hurdle in terms of like being cozy. It's kind of like about war, colonialism, environmental loss at its core. So there's a very different tone shift from Mickey Mouse and Friends to Avatar. And it would kind of be weird if we did get them as characters because they would have to be much bigger. And then, I don't know, could you just see the Avatar characters sitting in Remy's? Maybe. Dreamlight Valley, and I've always said this, Gameloft have really hit like the middle ground between a cozy life sim and nostalgia, and I feel like the nostalgia is the important point. A lot of us play this game for the nostalgia of it. Disney does that remarkably well. They're able to tap into nostalgia. They've been doing it for decades, but Avatar doesn't quite have that same nostalgia hit. Beautiful world, gorgeous items. Not sure if the story would fit, but I think cosmetically and sort of like aesthetically, they could do something really fun with Avatar, and I would love to see a couple of Pandora elements come into the game. Moving on, and I know this one is a little bit ridiculous, but bear with me because that's kind of like what the video is about. It's like, what doors does Star Wars open? So, The Simpsons. It does sound ridiculous until you remember Disney owns them now. Could Gameloft decide, let's try a little collab with Disney and bring some Simpsons stuff into the game? They're featured on Disney Plus very heavily. They have their own section. They're technically part of the family, and I've heard rumors that they would like to bring some small elements of The Simpsons to the park. So Disney are kind of like going in on The Simpsons, even though it almost feels like it's coming to its natural conclusion. However, The Simpsons does tap into that nostalgia that I was talking about with Avatar that it might not have, because a lot of us have grown up with The Simpsons because it's been on air for so long. And then I'm like, well, what would that even look like? Could we get like Marge's hair for our character? Could we get a house skin that is literally the Simpsons house? I mean, if they introduced them as characters, they would live in that, but I don't know. There could be a difference between the cosmetic items and then the ones that would be like character related. Perhaps we could even see like a giant lard lad donut sign. I don't know. I'm just spitballing. Now, The Simpsons does actually have a history with adjacent life sim games. Simpsons Tapped Out, which I completely forgot about. And then I was like, when I was researching for this video, I was like, wait, I used to play this religiously. That is wild. It was still going until like November last year, I think, and that blows my mind. So there is like an element of that life sim genre previously tapped into by The Simpsons in Tapped Out, but again, tone-wise, similar to Avatar, which is just different. I'm not saying The Simpsons is similar to Avatar, but similar to Avatar, The Simpsons is far more satirical. There's a lot more crude humor, and I don't think, like, I don't know, story-wise, can you imagine doing some quest that involves Cinderella's carriage and then having like Bart mooning by the side of it? I do think that something like The Simpsons would fundamentally change what Dreamlight Valley is. So even though that is kind of like a wild idea, I'm not saying that that's what they're going to do. I'm just kind of like discussing what the impact of introducing Star Wars, which is a non-classic Disney IP, could have on the rest of the game. So obviously this just isn't a question of like, do we like Star Wars? That's not what this video is about. It was just more about what type of game Dreamlight Valley might become, and they might not do anything with it. Maybe that was the only sort of like non-Disney related IP integration that we will get. Maybe it didn't sell very well. I feel like it did, so if it did, I expect to see more of that in the future, and that's what I mean. Could it be more Star Wars? Could it be something else? But I do think it's Gameloft testing the waters to see what direction they want to take the game in and how they sort of like gauge interest of what would be popular and what isn't. I am hopeful, because it is Gameloft licensing the stuff from Disney, that this doesn't just become a place to plug sort of like any Disney IP, because I don't think Gameloft want that either. I think Gameloft have got a specific vision for the game. Whereas if it was like entirely Disney owned, I would be concerned that it just becomes an advertising tool for Disney. And then that is definitely where we start to see sort of like those new releases just come in for the sake of it. But I don't think that's going to happen. And that's the reason, actually, just while I think about it, is why the cosmetic items work so well. Because even for the franchises that I mentioned sort of like previously, I think cosmetically, you could bring them in and people would be happy. It's just when you start mixing gameplay and sort of like storylines, because everything mixes together in Dreamlight Valley, that's the purpose of it. It would be strange to see some of those characters mixing with what we have so far. Whereas kind of like the parks, not to talk about the parks, but because of like the parks with decor items, they can be separate. So you can create, like I did the Naboo villa build in one little section of the Sunlit Plateau. That's a really nice way to use those items and be like, that's my Star Wars section, without having Darth Vader like running around. So I do think that cosmetic items are 100% the best way forward, and people are going to buy them if they're a fan of the franchise, which means more Moonstone spending for Gameloft, more money being made. Everybody kind of wins. So that is it for this video. Let me know down in the comments below what sort of franchise you would like to see. Is there anything you absolutely would not want to see come to Dreamlight Valley? And then where do you sit on just cosmetics versus kind of like realms, characters, and storylines being mixed together? Are you on either side? Do you like both? I don't know. If you did enjoy this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up. Maybe subscribe to the channel. If you don't already, nearly half of my viewers do not subscribe. So if you feel like hitting the button, it would be very appreciated. But with all that being said, I will leave it there for today. I will catch you in the next one, and I will, of course, see you in the valley.